Large parts of the UK are on flood alert again this morning.
The Met Office has issued a red alert, meaning a danger to life.
Feared that parts of England are suffering the worst flooding in decades.
We are still effectively in the midst of a crisis.
Money is no object in this relief effort. Whatever money is needed for it will be spent.
I'm here in Boroughbridge, a town set on the edge of the River Parrett and a victim of the floods that ravaged the Somerset Plains earlier this year. Prime Minister David Cameron pledged £10 million of aid and the support of the Armed Forces and the Environment Agency in alleviating the problem. Although the water levels have subsided, this town is definitely not back to normal. For hundreds of years, Somerset has been renowned for its seasonal flooding owing to the tidal movements of the Severn Estuary. The plains and moors, most of which are no higher than 25 feet above sea level, have always been low points in the terrain where rivers meet and after heavy rainfall burst their banks, causing wide-scale flooding. However, records show that floods ravaging the area since November have been the worst in 250 years. Although the causes of the floods are highly debated, the damage they cause isn't. Nobody can argue the sheer brutality of the cold waters and the effect it has on people's livelihoods. Scenes of panic and mass evacuation have gained the attention of international media, showing how the nightmare has become a reality. Flood defences, both commercial and improvised, have only succeeded in lessening the intensity of the flow, with some simply resigning to the inevitable. I spoke to the Environment Agency to find out exactly how this disaster arose.
For those of you who will have seen the weather forecast and certainly will have experienced this conveyor belt of weather systems which have been passing over across the Atlantic and battering into the western approaches, under normal circumstances we would have expected to see a gap of some period where the rivers would be able to recover and levels drop, but no sooner have we got rid of one low pressure system, then we have another one coming along, which in some cases it's accompanied by very strong winds, and you will have seen from the press coverage the amount of damage that's been inflicted on the coastal defences along the southwest. Fortunately for us here in Wessex, most of the damage is for us in the south around Chesil Beach. On the north coast, on the Bristol Channel, we've got away with it fairly lightly. However, what we are experiencing at the moment are exceptionally high river levels, with some stations recording record levels of flows, record depths of flooding on the moors, which in turn is causing us a great deal of angst, because the whole concept of flood risk management in Somerset is based upon storage of flood water on the moors themselves.
What has the public response been to the effort so far? I mean, obviously there's been proposed dredging. What's the public response to that mean?
Well, certainly, I mean, there has been a long history of dredging in Somerset for a number of years, in fact centuries, that some form of watercourse management has taken place. So at the moment the rivers themselves are absolutely chock-a-block, and the flood banks on each side of these rivers are what's protecting the majority of Somerset at the moment. But as with most things, there is a finite capacity, and once that capacity is reached, then flood water will overtop these banks and get stored in the moors themselves. And as I say, under normal circumstances, we would expect to be given a gap in the weather where we would be able to mechanically remove that water via our pumping stations. That's traditionally what we have always done, but I suspect that with these continuing weather patterns, we are in for the long haul. It's certainly exceptional circumstances we are witnessing at the moment.
And exceptional circumstances they were. Boroughbridge, a small village less than 10 miles from Bridgewater, found itself in the middle of the problem with no sign of a solution. Situated on the joining or confluence of the rivers Tone and Parrett, there was always going to be a flood risk for anyone who called it home. But residents insist that despite the huge volume of water that passes through the village every day, it has not been flooded for over 25 years. I spoke to Pete Hilling, whose family home was evacuated in January. So has this happened to you before?
No, never.
So it must become quite a shock, obviously.
Well, 361 has been closed, 2-3 times in the last 10 years, but I mean that's been for a couple of weeks, and then they pump it out and pump it back into the river, and it's fine again. But this is the first time we've ever got it into the garden, and so it just kept coming and coming and coming, and now it's going.
Were you prepared for the floods?
Well, I say, we've never been flooded ever before, and the history of the house, it's never been flooded. Even though it's below river level, it's well protected by the river banks, and it's not here that the water came over, it was down the spillway, and just not enough capacity there because the river hasn't been dredged, and it's half the capacity that it was 20 or 30 years ago.
So how's the support been for cleaning up?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I mean, everybody's been coming round and helping, and even when the flood water was getting here, people came round and helped carry furniture and everything upstairs. So everybody's rallied round. It's been fantastic from that point of view. The government and the Environment Agency have done precisely nothing really. So, well, apart from provided a bit of money and a few sandbags and things like that, but it's all been too late.
So it's all been the community that's really bonded well together?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was the community who put in the path at the back. Nobody else did that. They all got together, some farmer donated all of the chip-ins and everything, and everybody got together and just ran down, and 'cause it was just like a mud path before, and people were slipping all over the place.
I met local residents Leslie Irvin and her husband at an Environment Agency public consultation.
The water got to the house on December the 5th, and we were running 4 pumps, and we kept it at bay. I can't say we kept it out, but we kept it at bay. And because I've got dog kennels at the back, so we were measuring the level of the water on the well mesh panels, up 2 inches, down 2 inches. It was like living on a beach. One day it would drop, next day it would rise. And February the 5th, we realised, I phoned the Environment Agency in the morning, spoke to a young lad, I think it was Mark, and said, how much more is it going to rise? We've had a rapid rise this morning, and he said, I really can't tell you from here. I'll get some guys on the ground to come out. They arrived about half an hour later, and the first words were, silver alert, you're out. I then had to move 12 dogs and a pony. And that's it, so we got out. And when we left, there was about 9 inches of water in the house. My husband staggered down the next day to get a few bits and bobs, and it was about 2 foot. And that's how it stayed for about 4 or 5 days, and then it gradually subsided. It just overwhelmed the pumps. I mean, it was... we flooded in 2000, but the water came in on the Friday evening, we evacuated, and the Saturday morning it had gone. This time it stayed.
As of April this year, over 7,800 private properties have been flooded and 3,000 commercial buildings also submerged. To assist communities in recovery, over £197 million has been paid out by the central government and local authorities to repair property and create flood defences for the future, following David Cameron's initial promise of £10 million of emergency funding back in February. 2,100 households have been given temporary accommodation in safe areas nearby, whilst government grants of up to £5,000 have been made available to residents to help with repairs and rebuilds, supplementing insurance payouts and ensuring the damage caused will not be met with the same unpreparedness again. As residents visit their waterlogged properties, however, the sheer extent of the damage becomes clear. The only way to get around is by 4x4s or the volunteer all-terrain vehicles ferrying the homestead across the murky waters. As we draw nearer, the reality of it hits. These people have fought desperately to preserve their homesteads using any means possible, only to see their efforts washed away before them. The length of time some have resided here for, the time, energy and money they have put into making these houses homes, the stench of stagnant water and the filth lining their walls, I can only wonder how far money can replace what they've lost. For some, the receding waters uncover a shocking reality. This couple came home from holiday to find the property they rent out empty and barren, the tenants having taken only the bare essentials. Once home to a family, this house, like many others, is collateral damage in the struggle between man and nature. But it's not only residencies that have been affected by the rising tide.
So as you can see from the damage around me, the flooding has caused a surreal and unnatural waterline, leaving the area completely submerged.
But for some like Pete and Leslie, although the floods have made them wary, with pumps working day and night and communities coming together, Somerset is on the mend. Pete and his wife Marion have worked tirelessly with the help of volunteers from across the country to rebuild their home and beloved gardens to ensure that, despite lessons learnt, the floods are more of a painful memory than a living disaster. Though repairs are far from complete, progress is steady and the results speak for themselves. Sandbags, once holding back a torrent of icy water, are replaced with flower beds and evidence of water damage is minimal. But Pete and Marion were not the worst affected households, with some properties still uninhabited. I revisited the Environment Agency's office in Bridgewater to find out what has happened since the floods began and if anything could be done in the future.
Well, the first major thing that the agency has done is kick off the dredging programme, and there's an 8-kilometre section of the Parrotton River Tone which needs to be dredged. That has now started and will provide a certain amount of extra capacity in the Parrotton Tone system for the future, especially in the light of the tide comes up the Parrot and fluvial floods are coming down the Parrotton Tone system. However, there's lots of other things going on in the background in terms of repairs to flood defence assets that were affected during the floods, and community engagement and developing of future flood models of the Levels and Moors system.
So will dredging have a long-term effect, or is there any long-term plans for future flood prevention?
Certainly the indications are that by increasing the capacity at that pinch point of the Parrotton Tone system, it will give additional capacity to flows. However, the Levels and Moors system is so flat that the whole catchment, the whole floodplain is needed in terms of flood storage. So it's not just getting flood flows through the Parrotton Tone system. We do need the wider floodplain to store water in times of heavy flows. That will be ongoing. And, you know, with increased climate change and increased frequency of storm events, then it's likely that flooding will increase over time across the Levels and Moors system.
So how has the public response been to dredging or any of the other flood preventions?
I think certainly in my personal opinion, the adverse reaction we had to the fact that we weren't going to do any dredging, the fact that the minister came down and the 20-year plan has come in, the public response to we need this dredging has meant that additional funding has been obtained through the work of David Cameron as well, and the dredging programme has started. If there wasn't that adverse reaction and drawing the minister down, I'm not sure whether it would have happened. However, now it has happened. I'm sure that the people on the ground have been full of praise that it has started. However, they want more dredging to be done. They want it more extensive. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know.
It is clear that opinions on the next move are divided. Many residents have called for regular dredging of nearby rivers, whilst geological experts have been uncertain as to how effective dredging will be. As previously mentioned, the rivers in Somerset are extremely tidal, washing in waves of silt from the River Severn and the Bristol Channel, so removing the existing layers will only work for so long. Financially, regular dredging is unaffordable, but public demand for an immediate solution has led to its use as a temporary measure. Tests will be carried out and all options will be explored. With the future of the Somerset Levels and Moors uncertain, residents can only rebuild and hope for calmer skies this winter. However, only time will tell.